All right. Good to see quite a few folk. I'm sure when they see the star lineup here, more will come in. But good to have you guys on this panel. I'm Kunal. I'm a research analyst at Messari. This is the fast blockchain panel where we have only 10,000 plus TPS on all of these chains. So I'll do a quick introduction starting from Keone and just give a brief overview of where we are on the L1 and fast blockchain space, and then we'll just take it from there. So Keone is the founder of Monad, 10,000 plus TPS, fast alt L1, EVM based. Say is also doing it's a fast L1 alt EVM, but they also have an L2 parallel stack and very promising tech. It's already live on Mainnet. Rushi is from Movement Labs. It's an upcoming move-based L2 ecosystem of chains. So that's like the brief overview of it. And now, of course, there's this like idea in crypto that we're all building towards the same thing. I did not do like the best job of giving the overview of their chains, but what I would love to know is how would you describe the North Star for your chain? So we've had the world computer, we've had the decentralized NASDAQ. So how would you describe the North Star for your chain, and what are the trade-offs that you're doing to get like towards it? So what are the tech improvements, and what are the trade-offs of those tech improvements to get towards it? So I'll start with Keone and Monad. What is the North Star and the tech for it?
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. My name is Keone Han, co-founder of Monad. I would say that Monad's North Star is delivering maximum performance with minimum hardware requirements. So it's max min.
All right. Jay, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So, hey everyone, Jay from Say Labs. So our mission is to scale the EVM, and I think this has multiple different sides for it. From a purely technical side, I think this is going to be a combination of throughput and time to finality, just really optimizing everything around that. Went live on Mainnet a few months ago, and now most of our time is spent figuring out how we can further push the bounds around that moving forward.
And Rushi?
I'm Rushi, one of the co-founders of the movement. I think we're all working on speed, and I think they touched on the focus on high throughput execution. I think we're uniquely focused on smart contract security with the Move Prover, bringing formal verification at runtime. So there's two sides of user experience. Obviously, it's performance and throughput, but we're uniquely focused on how do you enable smart contracts to be secure and stopping the $4.5 billion loss we see every year in the EVM.
That's like interesting. So, Keone, I know you've spoken a little bit about how you want to control the whole stack, and which is why you've gone the the L1 route. Whereas, I mean, Say is a little bit in the middle, as are UJ, and Movement is just an L2 stack. So, do you think there are concrete benefits, like Keone, to you specifically, or what are the concrete benefits for building the entire layer 1 stack instead of perhaps just being like an L2? Could the Monad DB improvements, or could there not have been an EIP, or could there not have been an L2? Could there not have been a separate validator? You know, so how do you see like the core benefits of verticalizing the whole stack?
Sure thing. As I mentioned, the mission of Monad is to deliver maximum performance with minimum hardware. And in order to accomplish that, we need software improvements rather than just throwing hardware at the problem. We need new architectures in order to enable this. With Monad in particular, there are at least 4 different major architectural improvements that our team has been pioneering, which I'll mention really briefly. They're number 1, Monad DB, which is a custom state database for storing Ethereum Merkle tree data. I can touch on why that's important in a second, but second of all, optimistic parallel execution. So bringing parallelism to the EVM, because right now with Ethereum and most other rollups, execution is purely serial, which is totally crazy. Third of all, introducing asynchronous execution to enable separate swim lanes between consensus and execution, which massively raises the budget for execution. And then lastly, through Monad BFT, which is a high performance consensus mechanism that's a derivative of hot stuff that enables a large network with initially several hundred nodes participating in consensus, with the possibility of growing to the thousands of nodes through linear rather than quadratic communication. And just to sum it all up, we need these software improvements. We need these architectural changes so that we can preserve a high degree of decentralization. Anyone can run a node. Nodes can participate from anywhere around the globe. And we can push the limits of what's possible in Ethereum right now. Ultimately, I want to see some of these improvements ultimately make their way back to Ethereum as well.
Yeah, and to kind of build off of that, like this is something that I've been tweeting about recently. I'd love to get Rushi's thoughts on it as well. But if you have any kind of like modular system where there are several different parts of the stack with like separate DA layer, separate settlement layer, separate execution layer, it increases the overall complexity for the entire system. I think it allows you to have much faster experimentation, which, I mean, if you look at Web 2 with this idea of like microservices, it's kind of the same thing, where you can have a bunch of different microservices that are each specialized for a certain thing, but it does result in overall performance for the system degrading. I think in the case of Web 3, I'd make the argument that it increases the overall complexity for the system. Like the settlement layer has a reorg, then you now need to figure out what you should be doing on the execution layer side. So I'd make the argument that like the simplest system, and arguably the most performant system as well, will continue to be integrated. And I think that it'll be modular systems that have experimentation happening, and then eventually that'll result in people taking the learnings and creating integrated systems for the best possible performance.
I mean, just to sort of push back on that a little bit, isn't Say also going with this parallel stack with modularity and optionality in DA?
Exactly. So the way that we see Ethereum scaling is going to be multifaceted. Like one part of it is we think chains like Say, Monad as well will be helping scale the EVM to get the highest possible performance. We also understand that there's going to be teams that need dedicated block space for their own specific use cases. And in that case, it's kind of a no-brainer to be having a specialized high-performance virtual machine to be using for that. And I don't think that a sequential execution environment, as Keone was mentioning, is really going to cut it. Like, if you're getting 100 TPS, that is unacceptable for doing anything right now. So I think the future inherently is going to be parallelized. So yeah, I mean, that's where a parallel stack fits into that.
All right, and Rushi, do you have like a take? Do you believe from the L2 vision that adding this new VM on Ethereum, does that unlock benefits which Monad and Say may not from like the alternate L1 perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the modular versus monolithic debate that I'm sure you guys have heard years from now.
Yeah.
I think our general thesis is that modularity enables experimentation, different VMs, different DA layers. Today, it does have complexity. Yes, it's not as seamless UX as L1s, but reminder, like the modular thesis spawned out, it's like 6-7 months ago in production. There's actually no real modular chains live and like actually have ecosystems. I think we'll be one of the first to go to Mainnet. So the thesis is very still unproven. The general thesis is in like 4 years time frame when you have 10 different DA layers, 10 different VMs, 10 different sequencer companies, the survival of the fittest will win, where instead of having one labs entity work for the entire chain and produce the entire stack, you'll have hundreds of companies all racing to compete, and then the best companies will win from competition. So I, as an app, will be like, okay, this DA layer has the best throughput, this VM has the best throughput, I can customize my app chain for that cause and then use that chain for my use case. So I think I agree that today complexity is better with layer ones and monolithic chains, but I think tomorrow when we actually have more demand, people want customized block space, people want customized high throughput chains, and that's where the modular angle wins. But I think in reality, you'll have both use cases where if you want to build like an app today, it probably makes most sense to do an L1 like Solana, which already has infrastructure, already has a Lindy effect. But let's say you achieve some kind of PMF and you want to launch a customized app chain, or you have a special use case where you want to use a layer 2 then, that's when you can use a modular chain. So, I mean, ultimately both will coexist. You have out of the factory chains versus customized chains.
I'm sensing like, so I think we're again arguing the same thing as you're saying, that we're all building like towards the same end goal perhaps, where the L2s have like decentralized sequencers, or the L1s have cheaper verification, so you get high throughput, but also get like the decentralized benefits that we want in crypto, that the premise of crypto is for. I think, Jay, you raised this point, but do you see having a benefit in the L1 being like opinionated versus being completely like permissionless? So on Solana right now, we have an ecosystem of layer 2s coming up as well. I think Anatoly has said that there will be, it's permissionless innovation. So no matter what you're doing, you will have these use cases come up on top. So do you imagine that it is beneficial for the L1 to be opinionated as, as like Initia may be going towards, if you paid attention to the last panel, or like is it permissionless innovation where I believe that L2s will still come up maybe on both Say and Monad, like respectively.
Yeah, so we are in an interesting spot where we went through this journey of initially wanting to build an app chain, then more of a sector-specific chain. We've ended up realizing that a general-purpose chain is the best way for us to realize our vision. I think fundamentally, like, there will be people innovating to like create more of this specialized infrastructure, but I think once it comes to growing the ecosystem, it's a lot more difficult, and a lot of them will be migrating to becoming more and more general purpose. I think you're seeing this with Cosmos chains right now as well. Like Osmosis, for example, was purely an app chain before. Now they're trying to grow out an ecosystem. I think Injective is trying to do the same thing. So I do think this permissionless general purpose approach of a Turing-complete virtual machine does give you the most flexibility, and it makes it easiest to like grow an ecosystem on top of that.
Keone, do you think we'll see Monad L2s at some point in the future?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the end of the day, Monad is about making networks as computationally dense as possible. So when I say computationally dense, I mean, a network of several, 100 or 1,000 nodes that all have pure replication across them, across the world. There's, we're like, our team is working very hard to make that individual network as computationally dense as possible so that we can support billions of transactions per day within that network. But there is a fundamental limit, and the fundamental limit comes from network bandwidth and the ultimate requirements that that are placed on validators. Is the requirement 100 megabits per second? Is it a gigabit per second? Is it 10? Like, no matter what it is, there's some constraint. And then at that point, then it does become necessary to pursue either horizontal scaling, i.e. multiple Monad instances, or vertical scaling, i.e. The roll-up or fractal scaling approach of having a separate layer that commits state commitments and or transaction data back to a lower level. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's right now about efficiency and density of computation. And then if and when we saturate that, then we'll, as a community, see the growth of scaling through horizontal or vertical. But my view is that the time to do that is later. Like right now, it's more important to get that density up.
I think that that makes a lot of sense to me. I just share a similar view as well. Jay, you and I have gone back and forth a little bit on this, but do you believe that DeFi or Deepin, or like, are there specific sectors that you think are like the most best placed for like a decentralized architecture like we do in like blockchains? Or do you think, like, is there an opinion that you have on what kind of applications that you want to see like grow? Or is it that any application is good? How do you incentivize for the right metrics, and what do you think those metrics are in your ecosystems?
Yeah, I've definitely been thinking about this a lot more recently, and I think fundamentally, like, blockchains enable verifiable computation. So anything that benefits from verifiability does make sense to build on blockchains. What that means in practice right now is I think DeFi is the most clear-cut type of use case, specifically things tied to payments where you can have, especially cross-border payments between like actors that don't necessarily trust each other. I think that's where verifiability and trustlessness helps a lot. I think exchange of digital assets, which fundamentally means like trading meme coins right now, that is also a pretty clear use case right now. What I want to see happening more of is like DePIN, I think, can be exceptionally like impactful on society. So I'd really like to see that experimented with more. And I think a lot of that is happening on Solana right now. I also think that stuff tied to social gaming, we're starting to see more experiments with that on Say at the moment. So hopefully 6 months from now, there will be some pretty interesting use cases built up around that. But fundamentally, I think you should have everything because it is a general purpose virtual machine. So you should allow for anything to be built and support that.
Keone, do you have an opinion? Do you think it can create a noisy neighbor problem? I think there has been some, at least one of my colleagues covered Hyperliquid recently, where having free cancels on market maker orders, and I know some of you, like I know you're a Jump, so like canceling of like market maker orders should not be an L1 transaction because it needs to be like free and needs to be like very prioritized. So do you think there are some applications that are better suited for like app-specific chains, and that general purpose chains should have like an opinion on what is more beneficial for their ecosystems?
I think that it's possible to support most or all applications still within a general purpose chain. I think that it just might require localization of fee markets or partitioning, specialization of some of the fee mechanic rules. With that said, I do think that in the case of maintaining a fully on-chain order book, it actually is of great value to have that integrated within a broader ecosystem, because having the order book fully on-chain in a broader shared environment means that it enables atomic composability. So any app that's built on top of that order book that's utilizing the liquidity in the order book as a subroutine, like maybe even like the example that Jay just mentioned of cross-border FX payments, like if there needs to be a swap that's kind of like a subroutine within that broader function, it should just be able to do that without waiting and going to a separate environment. So I think there are a lot of benefits that come from composability. And at the end of the day, our thesis at Mainnet Labs is really just enabling really high performance, and which thus enables really cheap fees, so that users could effectively get the same result as in a centralized exchange environment, where those cancels and ads are completely free, because they're actually not completely free. Even then, like all the major exchanges have order limits in terms of the number of orders that can be sent. So there's still an implicit cost, and just get the cost really low so that it's still feasible to have the same level of liquidity.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that point around localized fee markets. Like, if you have a high performance virtual machine where you also support localized fee markets, then the noisy neighbor problem is a lot less, I think, in your face. So we're definitely going to start seeing flavors of that being adopted by like every high performance chain moving forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair. I think composability will unlock benefits, whether it's like it is a net value add, and there may be some trade-offs. Rushi, do you like agree with, like, do you believe that the trade-offs are worth it, or that that composability is like the true goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all building, hopefully, localized fee markets and better execution systems. I think what I'll add is that we're in this kind of multi-chain universe, and there's always like roll-ups. I think there's like over 500 roll-ups launched this year, for better or for worse. So I think what we're uniquely focused on is like, okay, if you have, there was this cross-chain FX example, if you have an asset class on Arbitrum and you're communicating with movement versus like optimism, how do you enable the interop? And we believe that shared sequencing is the way forward for multi-roll-up ecosystems. You have a few different schools of thoughts. You have like centralized sequencers, a way to go. But I would say that poses a lot of security risks from a government point of view and like regulation, but B, it's like, ultimately, everyone's going to say they're a fat chain thesis, right? Everyone believes that they're going to be chain to rule them all, but in reality, there's going to be 10, like 5, 6, 7 chains that exist. So we need better interop standards. So focusing on shared sequencing between different rollups is what I'd add. So combine that with parallelized and high throughput execution environments, you get a pretty good interop standard.
Are you guys still looking at using like Snowman or Avalanche L1s for the sequence?
We abandoned it. We use like a Tendermint consensus now that functions like an AVS fundamentally, where you have multiple token staking. Because the biggest issue with sequencing is a transaction finality. That's what like Espresso and other groups are focused on. It's state finality guarantees. So if I'm Arbitrum and you're Optimism, there's no way I can keep honest about state. But the way you solve that is you put economic guarantees at the sequence level. So if I'm Arbitrum, I put $1 million worth of ARB token. You're Optimism, you put $1 million worth of OP token. If any of us is lying about state, we get slashed. So we're working on building this slashing mechanism for sequencing, where now you have transaction finality and you have state finality, so you can actually accomplish those cross roll-up swaps.
I see. And do the sequencers have to be close to each other?
You're starting off with close, but eventually you want to spread it out.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, I love the debate. As like the final question, we have about 4 minutes left. To Rushi and Keone, it's when mainnet, and what is the most important thing that you're looking forward to in the next like quarters? And Jay, what are your hopes for the next few quarters, and how do you see Say playing a bigger role in crypto?
I'll start. We launched testnet, I would say, a month and a half ago. You can check out testnet.movementlabs.xyz, and mainnet coming end of the year.
End of yours?
Cool.
Yeah, so from our side, we went live on Mainnet back a few months ago. So the biggest focus right now is really growing out the ecosystem and also figuring out like what's next from more of a technical standpoint. I think there's a ton of really cool research our team has been doing from the technical side that we'll be putting out blog posts about in the near future. But basically, the goal continues to be scaling the EVM, so higher performance around that. In terms of ecosystem growth, I think the past month has been just incredible. Like, literally every conceivable metric that we were tracking has hit all-time highs. So because of that, I think that just having the parallel EVM that is live, that is able to result in folks that are like deploying contracts, being able to like get liquidity in the ecosystem, that's been great to see, and that's going to continue being the focus for the next foreseeable 6 months.
What are the most important metrics for you that you track? So I've covered layer ones in the past. We've had a bit of a discussion on this, but do you believe it's like TVL, TPS, users, developers, applications? Where is the?
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamentally all the things you mentioned. We have like an Artemis dashboard that we go over during every single one of our like full like all hands between like labs and foundation, and some of the most important metrics are tied to TVL, number of transactions, and I guess volume of trading activity that's happening as well.
I do believe that there is something to be said about quality of like users, quality of transactions. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there like the ARP transactions aren't as useful, but that's like from a human perspective. Maybe from the blockchain perspective, it's as long as they pay the gas fee, it's all good. Yep. I won't take too much time. Keone, on to you.
Yeah, Monad is targeting a mainnet early next year, bringing to production these various improvements that our team has been working on, including MonadDB, which is a new database. I know there's a lot of excitement in the industry nowadays about new databases, and we're just excited to show off the performance of this component as well as other improvements like the optimistic parallel execution, asynchronous execution, and Monad BFT, and then start to see those get pushed into other parts of Ethereum.
All right. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. It was great chatting with you. Thank you for coming to Messari Mainnet. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.